Welcome to Boundless Pursuit, a weekly podcast providing motivation, entertainment, and education to anglers and outdoorsmen. I hope that the stories you'll find here will encourage you to chase your passion more fervently, to open your mind to new opportunities and perspectives. Your engagement and feedback is critical to the growth of this show, and I would love to hear your suggestions on topics or potential guests. You can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com or at my website, www.boundless-pursuit.com. That's where you'll find all related articles, media, and merchandise. Please remember, the show will gain traction from your support. Be sure to like, comment, and share this podcast to your friends and connections. I'm your host, David Graham. Now let's get on to today's episode. As some know, Boundless Pursuit started as a blog that I wrote in 2011, but it wasn't yet its own thing, and I had not yet built my own website, and social media just wasn't the monster that it is today. Boundless Pursuit was part of fishingheadquarters.com, where I contributed to an e-magazine that I think was way ahead of its time, and that was created by my good friend and today's guest, Andrew Ragas. And Ragas and I have worked together on various forms of fishing media for years. He's a talented web developer and media creator and a very talented fisherman out of the Midwest. And while Andrew's specialty is monstrous smallmouth bass, make no mistake, he's a multi-species angler who takes a very scientific and organized approach to his fishing. Showcased on his website, northwoodsbass.com, Andrew does seminars and speaking engagements, online courses, and runs a guide service in the Northwoods regions for giant smallies and muskie. The dude catches some absolute gigantic smallmouth bass. And we took time during this conversation to catch up on our history, discuss how fishing media has evolved, and just talk fishing tactics. This is my good buddy, Andrew Ragas of northwoodsbass.com. But hopefully we don't get thrown off our flow too much. But anyway, man, I'm glad I got you on here. It's been a long time in the making. Matter of fact, anybody that's listening, the very name Boundless Pursuit started between you and I on your format because we go way, way back. Maybe even when I think we were both still maybe even in college when we first started talking, like back in the...
We were collaborating a good 10, 15 years ago, and that's when it started. Through Fishing Headquarters online magazine.
That's right. So I was like
around 2010 through when I stopped doing it, it was 2015. I was getting burnt out with it. Yeah. The constant editing and putting it all together, the big publication. But yeah, I gave you a space on my domain and through the website, and that's when your blog was born.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, dude. That was a weird time, I think, in fishing media time because it was, I know what you're going to say. And what I was going to say is it was an odd transitional time. Yeah. The YouTube was just starting to grow. That's when all the YouTubers and Instagrammers started coming on, the mid 2010s. So around 2015. Digital publications and magazines, a lot of magazines even nowadays, they're going extinct. Oh yeah. The publishing industry is totally extinct. Yep. So everyone who's still surviving, they're doing the all online digital format, like what I attempted 10 years ago almost. And, that's the landscape right now. And, when we did our gig, that's when magazines were already getting extinct. Yeah. And everyone became a YouTube sensation and fishing superstar then. And that's how a lot of folks got elevated through social media. Yeah, definitely. But you and I, we did things our own way, the old fashioned way, and we did it our way, totally different. Right. We're not into Instagramming and YouTubing really. Yeah. I'll do the Instagram thing because it's anybody can put some pictures up. YouTube almost, I played around with making some little videos. I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't have time for this. When YouTube started, I used to do a bunch of video logs
Like, I don't even know what they were called back then, 10, 15 years ago, but I used to do a lot of my fishing solo by myself. So I would document a full day on the water as it is in my boat. Just putting each day's documentation of fish catches together. It was strenuous work. And then I remember back in like 2014, 2015, I had to retire. I got so tired of having to come home every day after a long, strenuous day on the water. Every night I would be up till 1 or 2 a.m. trying to splice together a bunch of video clips of fish that I caught, putting it together, then exporting it out onto YouTube the next morning, and then having to repeat that process over again the next day. So I got burnt out doing that. And then another thing that started happening was a lot of spot hawking through YouTube. That's something that plagues a lot of anglers nowadays when they document a lot of things on YouTube. You know, people can easily pick apart backgrounds. They'll figure out what bodies of water you're at. I can do that very well just by watching an actual television program.
Especially if they throw a drone. Yeah. If they throw a drone in the air, you can forget about it.
Yeah. So like doing drones, showcasing boat landings, any landmarks that might be noticeable, or just revealing where, for instance, in Wisconsin are you at? You know, what county? That's just a dead giveaway. And unfortunately, I was a recipient of a lot of that, and then I had to stop. But in recent years,
I've only had one kind of weird one happen to me, like in person, and it was back in like 2012, maybe. And I guess this probably wasn't related to YouTube. It may have just been photos, because you can do the same thing with some photos. You know, back then, you know, I don't know. You didn't think about that. I didn't think, like, even back in YouTube, I think my earliest YouTube video is like 2007. Of course, it's like a clip of like me releasing a gar or something.
Yeah, and the video's probably all grainy and pixelated.
Oh, it's awful. And then I made a couple where there was like a little music montage, and it was just like a 5-minute clip that I could like share with my friend. I had no idea that it was something that could even, like, the idea that that's something that could make money was never even a thought.
Yeah.
But I've always been so pessimistic about like the possibility of those things working. I had never even would have even invested the time to do it anyway. But I had one weird one time that kind of like got to a point where I was like, all right, I got to start being smarter and safer with my photos. And me and my brother were at the Red River fishing for alligator gar, and like we were in a spot no one like ever went to. It was so hard to even get in there. It was a lot of work just to make it in there.
I recall reading your stories about accessing and what you did.
And so one day this guy pulls up like on this bluff. It's like a cliff that goes down to the water. And like we used to like rappel down that thing. I'm like, what is this guy doing? And then he gets out of his car, opens up like the back of it, pulls out a box and pulls out an inflatable boat and inflates it, drops it down the cliff. And then it comes down. I'm like, oh, no, somebody's here. And he had like big rods. I'm like, oh, man, hopefully he's just catfishing. Then he came around the corner and he pulled up to us and he goes, are you David Graham? I'm like, what the hell?
No, yeah.
And I was like, yeah. And he just goes, yes. He said, yes. And he put his hand like that.
Celebrity, dude.
I'm like, what the hell's happening? And he's like, I knew it. He said, yes, I knew it. He's like, man, I saw your pictures online of the alligator gar, and I saw the rocks in the background, and I like looked at the shadows in the background. I don't know. He said, I mean, he was very upfront and honest.
Matched it all up on Google.
I'm like, dude, how did you do that? Rocks, dirt, shadows.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, this isn't good. But anyway,
people will go to extremes.
That was a while. And the funny thing is, I only fish that spot like once or twice a year. So the odds that we would like be there at the same time
on the same day,
astronomical.
Yeah, insane.
But yeah, man, those fishing headquarters days, that was a lot of fun for me. Like I thought that was like right at the tail end of when like fishing media was still like pure, and like there's still forums out there. Like there was still a little bit of engagement on like the forum days where, I don't know, man. It seemed like the people you encountered on the internet with regards to fishing were like in it for more of the right reasons. And then slowly but surely at the inception of Instagram and the growth of Facebook.
I want to add Facebook. I think, you know, we grew up with Facebook, you know, back in the day when it was just accessible to college
guys.
students. Yeah, that was us. Like we were the poster children of Facebook back in the mid 2000s. So like once it opened up to every single adult and person in the world, then that I believe around then that was the whole downfall of the forum age when we were on our specialized discussion boards. Yeah. And now you try to access websites like riversmallies.com or any other type of major former fishing forum. They're no longer around.
There may as well be like a digital like tumbleweed going across the screen. It's sad. Like some of my favorite ones, they're even still out there. It's like, man, this place used to be the spot. But I felt like you were ahead of your time when it came like that Fishing Headquarters magazine. You'd done such a good job at and you were doing it all completely alone, like single-handedly editing, putting it together, the layout. Work, I was like, man, this dude's really. And it was cool because you did that way ahead of your time as well, because that was especially during a time where like, and nobody's putting a bowfin in a magazine.
Back then, no one even tried doing it digitally with like the format, like our
digitally, no
platform.
Way.
Yeah, the digital software and website that we used was Issue, which now is popular. Everyone uses it now for everything. And I think like the issue that I had was one-man show. So I had to put together the outlines, the drafts. I did all the proofreading. You wouldn't believe all the proofreading I had to do for your stories, even also for everyone else. And then I'd have to repeat the process then every 2 to 3 months. And that just became the biggest drag for me.
Yeah, that's nuts.
But we still have that website online, and I still have everything up online as an archive. So
I know. I was looking at it. I was looking at it earlier today, actually.
fishing-headquarters.com. So I'm still going to have that website up online. And then I know that you and I have talked about ideas. Hey, how can we bring this back? But, turn it into some modern age marvel. But, we still haven't really fully brainstormed about it. So,
well, it's
something to work on in the future still.
That whole like media thing seems like it's like turned into such a spinning cyclone of like the next newest thing coming out. And it's like, I'm at a point now where I'm not going to evolve with it. Like I'm not going to do TikTok. I'm not going to do whatever there's going to be a new one next month for all I know. I'm like, I'm not doing it. Like I'll stick with what I'm doing now. And that'll work for me because I am not building new crap.
So nowadays, with all these social media platforms, everyone's turning into different outlets for their fishing promotion or promoting of themselves and their accomplishments. All you need still is a website. Have a good website. It's always going to be found online. It's the World Wide Web. That's all you need. Really,
man, I have no background at all in that stuff. But I've had so much fun with like my little website. Like it's because I can put whatever I want on there: video, photos, podcast. I've even got little merchandise on there, which no one ever buys anything. I buy my own stuff. Get my discounted rate. But that
website, you always continuously add content to it, and it becomes your treasure trove for your readers and followers. Yeah.
Oh man, I love it, and it's like I've got a couple of my blogs on there now. It's like they're like #1 hits with certain topics. Like they're at the top. I'm like, oh man, I feel kind of proud about that. But that's way more fun than something like Instagram where you can only put a photo and like a small caption.
And a caption, and I'm just like 500.
I'm at a point now where like the Instagram's starting to even slow down for me, and I'm just gravitating towards just I'm gonna have fun with my little website here, and like this is like my fun little thing to have on the side. But what's awesome about you is you stayed in it this whole time, and like you've stayed in it during such like tumultuous transitionary period that it's like and not only stayed in it, now I know that you're even like benefiting from it like monetarily to the point like this has become your job, like it's like you're living. So I was kind of curious, like I know your history going back to when we were still in school and some of the projects you did in between, but I want to know a little bit more now about the northwoodsbass.com thing. What all is going into that? Some of the I saw like the seminars and the webinars, and it seems like a very dynamic option for like learning. So tell me a little bit about that. How did that get started?
All right, so I guess it all dates back to me being an angler up in northern Wisconsin. So growing up, I actually used to be more of a panfish and walleye angler, just like everyone else from my region. Because back then, 20 to 30 years ago, like our fisheries were very strong in regards to both and to more multi-species opportunities. But then, fisheries are cyclical. They always change, as you know, David. And then, I'd say right at around high school age. So dating back between 2000 and 2005, that's when my whole philosophy and, me wanting to target more specific fish, that changed. So going from walleyes and panfish more to bass, that's when I started that conversion. And at that time, 20 years ago, our fisheries up in northern Wisconsin, they were getting more established. They were growing. Back in the mid 1990s, a lot of our lakes, they got plagued with rusty crayfish infestation. So what happened then was, other game fish species, they suffered as a result of crayfish just devouring the whole biomass of the lake. But what happened was a lot of lakes, they had some smallmouth back then. So the smallmouth, their numbers, they grew. They took advantage of that new opportunity to feed on an overabundant forage source. And then over the course of the next 20 years, smallmouth kept growing big. Our lakes and fisheries expanded. More bass lakes just somehow showed up over time. And that's really when my whole love, that's when my love for bass just really exploded. And I'd say, the last 20 years, that's been my primary focus, largemouth and smallmouth. But smallmouth bass, chasing big ones, that's been my serious, true passion for the last several years. And I wouldn't change it any other way. I'd say Northwoods bass, it really started, I'd say it all started way back when, 20 years ago, when my infatuation with smallmouths really began. Around that time, I was already writing articles for publications and then even for our website, Fishing Headquarters. And then I had the idea. I never actually had the plan to want to even try guiding, just because I knew what hassles it would bring, all the high expenses and operating costs, as well as the headaches of dealing with weather and anglers who might not be cut out for that type of a thing to join me in the boat for. But I'd say, around 2015, 2016, that's when I really started getting it going. I picked up a lot more customers in the ensuing years, and that's been one of my secondary gigs. It's a nice little side career that I've been trying to maintain, keep up with, and to continue growing.
Yeah, I could see guiding. I don't know. I think if all of your finances kind of hinged upon your success there, that would, I just couldn't deal with that type of, I wouldn't want that pressure on my fishing. But if it was like a side source of income, that would be best case scenario.
Yeah. The way I treat fishing, like for work, it's definitely a side job. Like, as you know, and like a lot of other people who know me, my primary source of income and my day job is sitting here in my office. I build websites. So that's my primary day job. And me working for myself, it ultimately enables me to fish whenever I want. I can still usually travel whenever I want to, which is a nice thing. And that, the two occupations hand in hand, they work off of each other very well. Yeah. So that's what ultimately gives me that flexibility and that ability to keep fishing and to, pursue my passion.
So now, does that give you the opportunity to almost kind of vet out certain clients? Because I would want to be in position to I don't know, I hate to say it, I'd want to be able to tell certain people no. Because I would have a fear of people coming in that are just trying to lurch spots, they're trying to do.
I don't want to get into too much detail about that, but I have had folks whose sole intentions were to either hire me to see what specific hotspots I can lead them to.
Oh, I don't doubt that at all.
And I've had guys who have inquired with me wanting to know what my exact top 5 bodies of water are. So then they can eventually go there and just, piggyback off that information that I would reveal to them. But folks like that, I've never heard from them ever again, just because I never gave them that information that they were seeking out of me. But I'm all inclusive to everyone and everyone's skills and abilities. I'd say there's specific times throughout the year where I will want to cater to guys who are hardcore. So for instance, the month of May and then the months of September and October, like the weather can do anything it wants at that time of year. And that's also the 3 months out of the year where the biggest fish in each lake, they're making their push to either feed, spawn, or winter, or do whatever that they want. So, with those 3 months right there, I want to cater and target, the hardcore angler. Whereas during the summer months, I'm more flexible, laid back. I'm very accommodating of people of all skill levels. And even if they want to go dink around, try something new with me, I'm more than game and willing to do that then. But I have gotten pretty good with, weeding out the unruly type of customer, and just, I'm pretty good at interrogating them, seeing what their intentions are, what it is that they hope to accomplish with me. But I also want honesty from them, just to make sure that this is all a good fit. And recently for Midwest Outdoors, I'm actually a writer for them. I write monthly columns. So I put together a piece that surprisingly got published a couple of months ago about, checklists. Actually, it was more like a guideline of, about trying to hire the right type of a fishing guide. So I had to, the whole subject matter of that piece was just putting down, expectations from the customer's side and then expectations from the guide's point of view. And then the two of them have to mesh together in order to be compatible. So, a lot of people who inquire with guides, they're not asking the right type of questions that a guide wants to hear. And that's the biggest issue nowadays with everyone.
Well, I think
I am not the most perfect guide out there. We're all human.
Oh, yeah.
But we have expectations of the angler himself, just like, they have expectations of us trying to produce, to educate, and to deliver results for them.
Right. Yeah, because I thought that like the element of, or, the fact that you're guiding for something like, I guess smallmouth bass is a different game than like largemouth bass. But I'm like, I'm just thinking like the demographic of people who are paying to go bass fishing is it seems like a different challenge, because I would think that you'd maybe potentially run into more, I don't want to say like know-it-alls, but people are able to go bass fishing in like their backyard, but I would imagine they're looking for a higher caliber of fish.
That's a good thought and question. So like the people who want smallmouth bass, like they're either looking for a destination trip, which is where I'm located, or they want like the opportunity to tangle with 4 and 5 pounders, just because big fish don't live everywhere. That's usually everyone's goal with that. But if I had to target 4 and 5 pounders every day, then that pressure's on me then, because they don't jump into the boat daily, unfortunately.
Now, do you prefer? Maybe everything's different. I'm always curious. Like I love knowing the mindset of guides. Do you prefer somebody that's more of a novice, or I guess maybe more open to coaching, or do you prefer somebody that at least you can take more of a hands-off approach because they already kind of know what they're doing? Or is there like a sweet spot in the middle? Because if they're too much of a know-it-all, they just want you to shut up and chauffeur them around.
Yeah, so my perfect angler in the boat is one who's going to either listen and take all the advice that I'm going to give them. Like the biggest thing that I try to do daily, like when we're on a specific spot, we pull up to an area that we're going to target. The first things I tell people, we got to cast in this direction. You'll see it on the side imaging screen that's down below by their feet, because I keep a unit up at the bow of the boat where my customers fish from, and I've got screens on my back end of the boat. So like, we pull up to a spot, I instruct, hey, you got to go out like 50 feet to the right. I want you to present this specific bait. I'll give lure recommendations, stuff that I would throw. So I want guys, ideally, who are willing to listen, but also if they're open-minded. So say my strategy that I told them to do sucks and it's not producing, I want the anglers to also get creative for themselves. The ideal customer and bow partner that I'd like, you can bounce ideas off of each other. You can learn from one another too, because I don't know everything about these fish. They perplex me as much as everyone else still. We're not fish. We don't think like fish, but that's just the way it rolls. But I have had guys on the other hand who have been very stubborn. I'm in the back of the boat. I'm fishing. I'm tinkering from the back end of the boat. I'm trying different presentations while my angler's up at the bow. They're throwing the fish catchers. So all the baits that the front end of the boat gets, all the baits that the front end of the boat is throwing, those are going to be your higher producing baits that catch all the fish. Whereas me in the back, I'm tinkering, I'm dicking around, throwing all kinds of weird shit.
Yeah.
And there's instances where I'm hitting hot streaks. I find something that's working. I catch big fish repeatedly on whatever it is I'm doing. The anglers up front, they're not catching fish anymore. I've had guys that have been too stubborn to make that adjustment like I did. I offer them baits that, hey, this is working. Throw this, fish it the way I am. They refuse it, so I can't help them. I can show people what to do, tell them how to do it, but I can't make people catch fish.
I think if you get to the point where you're literally showing them the success, like you're catching the fish and they still don't want to listen.
I'm exemplifying, I'm demonstrating it to them. I'm instructing. That's
right.
Job.
I think it's one thing to like make a recommendation. It's another thing to put it into action and catch one right in front of them. And then they still not listen. But it's I just know like that culture of fishing so much more competitive that I was always curious, like, because like bass guiding is real big where I'm at on like Okeechobee. You got a lot of guys that like that's what they do.
Yeah, those big waters down south, I couldn't do it unless you're like a touring pro and you know the ins and outs of those waters. I couldn't do it.
A lot of them are just shiner fishing.
But where I'm very lucky in regards to guiding up north in Wisconsin, we have hundreds of thousands of lakes to pick and choose from. So with me being a guide, like I know I know the intricacies of a lot of lakes and how fish respond to them or respond in them on certain days, certain weather conditions too. So that's one of the things that I really take a lot of pride in, just knowing the intricacies of the fish that inhabit the lake, how the lake reacts to conditions, weather, everything. And, you put the puzzle pieces together. I'm very confident that most days of the week, I can select the right type of water to be on that caters to the anglers that I have and to what our motivation for that day is. So down south, if you're on those big waters, big massive reservoirs, you really don't have that luxury like I've got with being able to pick multiple lakes per day to fish based on my anglers and what we feel like doing that day.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool. It's for me with your stuff, it's those giant smallmouth. Like this is not, like for years I've marveled over the smallmouth you catch, and it's like, well, really long overdue from making that trip for myself. And people get this idea that I don't like to catch bass. Like I love bass fishing. I like carve out parts of the year every year to go bass fishing, even around here. But it's been years since I've been able to go smallmouth fishing. But all my experience with smallmouth has been in rivers and in creeks, like in moving water. But you pulling those giant monstrous fish out of lakes has always been interesting to me, because I've always thought of a smallmouth as being a river, like a river dwelling fish. So I was curious, like, how do you pattern that? I mean, are they the kind of fish that's like migratory and moving within a lake system, or do you have like areas that that will, like, are the fish kind of like, I don't know if they have like a territorial area that they're typically always in? I mean, how does a smallmouth in a lake behave as compared to like what I'm used to in like the Ozarks in rivers and streams?
So I don't know if you want me to differentiate, between, the characteristics and behavior of a river fish versus a lake fish, but it all relates to location. So as you know, smallmouth in rivers and streams, they will migrate for several miles as long as there's no barriers in place. So what we found in Wisconsin, what biologists have found, you remove dams, smallmouth, they can migrate, 50 to 80 miles, no problem, from one season to another as it relates to feeding and spawning and then overwintering. Whereas in lakes, the migrations in lakes are less distinct as what we see on river systems, but it all relates to location. Location precedes everything in my boat when we're on the lakes. So for instance, I guess the easiest way to describe it is smallmouth, they're going to adjust their positions within the lake based on the season, also factoring in food availability, water temperatures, and, I guess overwintering also, just because the growing season up north, it's only 5 to 6 months long. So for half the year, those fish are living underneath ice. So the best way to describe a lake migration is, the way I like to start this phase and pattern and dissecting is where the smallmouth are overwintering. That's usually the first thing you need to look at on a lake. So by late October, November, that's when smallmouth are going to be moving into their wintering holes. They're going to be setting up shop there for the next 5 to 6 months. Not every lake behaves the same way. So like a wintering site on a lake, it can be like a patch of sandgrass and 25 feet of water. Whereas on other lakes, it could be a hole that's, 30 feet deep with different bottom composition, or, rock, boulder, sand, muck, mud, a variety of underwater, just underwater compositions. So those smallmouth, they're going to be down deep 5 or 6 months out of the year. Then once the ice melts, that's when you do start seeing that spring migration. So what happens on smallmouth on every lake, they leave their wintering sites. Smallmouth do school in lakes. So they travel in packs for feeding, for migration, and then for, their biological needs, whether it be wintering or spawning or doing whatever. So once the ice melts, fish, they're using the contours down below along the bottom as their migrational routes, from moving from deep water into intermediate depth, mid-range, where they're going to be situated at for staging or for feeding. Yeah. And then once the timing is right, later in the spring, once the water temperature hits a certain threshold, those fish then will be infiltrating through the shallows, where they're either going to be feeding or setting up spawning sites then to reproduce. And then during summer months, fish, they'll disperse back throughout, they'll disperse all throughout the lake. Then usually at that point in the year, we're targeting structure. Smallmouth are attracted to structure, just like walleyes and a lot of other big game fish are. Yeah. And then, in the fall months, there's going to be a movement of fish. They'll be coming back in towards the shallows to feed again for one last time in the year. And then once you're in October, the lakes are finally turning over. After fall turnover, that's when those fish are down deep again. So that's really the whole cycle of smallmouth movements and migrations as it occurs on lakes. So, on lakes, fish don't have to travel super far. A wintering site is going to be anywhere within range of spawning sites in spring. So it could only be a difference of a couple 100 yards. Whereas on river systems, smallmouth, they'll travel for miles between spawning areas that are suitable for them in spring to overwintering locations, which would be downriver somewhere. So
it's interesting to me, all like the patterns you have to sort of internalize and log. Yeah. Do you keep any kind of like physical, because I know you said that each lake is different from one another, but maybe each lake is always the same as like individually each year. Do you keep like a log? Oh, there you go.
Funny
blow some dust off of that thing.
Yeah, so funny you mentioned this. So with a lot of my guys who, guide customers and readers and followers, I've often talked about
the playbook.
The playbook of bass. Yeah. So
crack it open, zoom in.
Yeah. So like what's funny about this, I've got like all my article outlines, things that I figured out over the years.
Screenshot.
I've got checklists. I even keep some lake maps in here. But what I've always liked to do, and my log is really, it's very simplified, kind of old school and ghetto. But what I do is I have a section dedicated. So like I'll dedicate it to my log of lakes. So what I do, I list the date that I'm on the water. I'll also indicate what lakes we fished that day. And then I'll put a rating next to that date and lake. I'll rate it on a scale of A+ to an F- that tells me, okay, we had a good day on that day on this lake, and that's what we caught. So I've been doing this, just it keeps me mentally fresh. I can remember specific dates when we visited a certain lake, and then that usually helps me pattern when I should be visiting that water, later on in the year. But I've been doing this since around 2010. So for the last 13 years, I got dates, several pages of them that just helps keep me, me mentally fresh and prepared, and hopefully it'll help me make a good, educated, and well-calculated decision then for later in the year.
I admire the dedication to I don't know, preserving the details and
Yeah.
I think if you're going to be effective as like a guide or whatever, you kind of have to have that mentality where you're documenting.
And what's funny about that, growing up, I never really paid attention or had a good eye for detail or the attentiveness for it. But, just fishing with a lot of good friends and other guides whom I'm good buddies with, they taught me like the fundamentals and the importance of being detail oriented, keeping a log, trying to remember certain patterns as they happen, and then figuring out why did that fish want to bite my lure and what makes this spot so special. So besides the catch itself, making a catch, you have to figure out and analyze, all right, why did I catch this fish and why is that fish utilizing this area at this specific time that I'm on that spot? So stuff like that, I always want to pay attention to it, figure it out. And from there, it turns into a science. That's kind of how I approach my game with big smallies.
Well, that's the funny thing is like you can have a great day on one day under certain conditions, like specific conditions. And then like, a year later, double back and have the exact same conditions. You have to wait 12 full months to see if there's actually a pattern to it. And then 12 more months and really like, so it's a long-term like investment of like detailed documenting before you can even begin to see if there's a real trend.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly accurate. So like I try to make those annual connections every spring. I guess what I'm trying to say is, with the fish spawning in certain areas and specific areas of a lake, I try to apply that knowledge into every new water body that I fish, that time of year. So for the month of May. And then also I'm making similar findings when I'm fishing late season. So the month of October into, late in October, once those fish are wintering, I'm learning new shit every year. Things that I never thought of that I just somehow figured it out while on the water. And time is obviously the best investment that any angler can have. So, if you think you know everything, you don't. You keep fishing, you repeat the process every single year. It turns into a tradition, and you're going to learn all sorts of new things that you never thought were in existence. And that's usually what happens. Trying to analyze it and make that process repeat itself every year. There's a lot of truth and accuracy to that.
100%. So you'd mentioned earlier, and I wanted to I'm backtracking just a little bit here, where it was actually, I don't know, a surge in like the prevalence in a certain type of crayfish that set off this, this growth in the population of, the smallmouth, which, obviously I guess that's because they came in eating them all. But is this crayfish, is this like a native species of crayfish? It just seems weird to me that something, especially if it naturally exists, would just all of a sudden proliferate like that. I wonder what would trigger that.
So the crayfish itself is native to the Ohio River drainage, rusty crayfish. So southern Ohio, northern Kentucky range. So back in the day, what happened was a lot of bait shops and traveling anglers, they were using those crayfish for live bait. And back then, releasing your critters into the lake or disposing them onto shore, that was the process that a lot of anglers did. So these crayfish, they can be transported from one body of water to another. Back in the day, they were popular bait. We didn't know it at the time, and that's what happened. So these critters, they got into our lakes, aquatic invasive species, AIS. That's what they are. They're not native to the north, and the problem of rusty crayfish, it's all throughout the Great Lakes range. Northwest Ontario, a lot of those lakes are getting hit and plagued by it right now. But what happened was those rusty crayfish, they expanded their numbers in a lot of inland lakes of Wisconsin. This all started in like the late 1980s, all through the 1990s and into the early 2000s. And as a lot of those lakes, rusty crayfish, what they do, they'll boot out all of the other native species of crayfish. And what they're also going to do a lot of is stir up the bottom. They eat weeds like crazy. They just chop them up all day long.
Yeah.
And what happened was, with all that cover leaving the lake, a whole mess of things happened. So other game fish species, they started to experience poor spawning, poor spawns, poor recruitment of fry surviving into adulthood. And then another thing that was happening also back then and still happens now is the removal of other game fish species. So you got a combination of all that happening along with rusty crayfish eating out the whole lakes. That just gave smallmouth and a lot of other bass the opportunity to expand their numbers on lakes. So once smallmouth numbers were expanding, those smallmouth, they were targeting crayfish like crazy. And that's what ultimately helped a lot of the fish that I catch achieve those 4 to 6 pound statuses. But right now, a lot of our lakes, they've recovered back to normal pretty much. So rusty crayfish numbers, they're dwindling and on the decline. So smallmouth now, the ones that we're catching and targeting, they're actually focusing more on bait fish now for their primary prey. So yellow perch, cisco, smelt.
Yeah.
A lot of pelagic species now.
Because that's kind of what I was going to ask next. Is like, does that sort of dictate that you're using a lot of crawfish patterns, or are they more swim baits?
So like on open water. So like on specific lakes that have just a high crayfish forage, whether it's native species of crayfish or rusty species of crayfish, we're focusing on crayfish imitating baits always. And then there's lakes lakes that have very little crayfish remaining in them, and on those lakes it's all bait fish oriented presentations then. So that's what happened. And then going back to me explaining how lakes and fisheries are cyclical, it's the same thing with these crayfish. So their numbers peaked 20 plus years ago. Now their numbers are declining and lakes are returning to their former glory now, which is nice. But funny thing about rusty crayfish, so I got a story. So if you didn't think rusty crayfish are voracious eaters and will not tear up weeds and plants, they do. I've done a couple trips on Lake of the Woods and Rainy Lake. Last time I was there was in 2017. And right before our eyes, we're fishing shallow water, pencil reed areas. And before our eyes, we saw stems and stalks getting chopped up. They're standing upright one moment.
Just going down.
And then the next moment, they fall into the water. Like, what the hell happened here? What's going on? And then that's the result of rusty crayfish eating out all the plant life.
Oh my gosh.
It's happening on Rainy Lake and Lake of the Woods as we speak. So a lot of cabbage beds and pencil reeds that those two lakes had, 10 years ago, those are leaving. Thanks to rusty crayfish.
Have like state, I don't know what you would call it, like agencies of some sort, not picked up on like the effectiveness of utilizing smallmouth bass to combat that, or are
they have. So back when rusty crayfish was first becoming a problem in Wisconsin, that's when they started to enact better regulations to protect smallmouth bass, because the DNR for us, they realized, all right, these fish are going to actually help us eradicate crayfish. And that's what happened. So, smallmouth doing their job in conjunction with the DNR, setting up traps throughout the lakes, that did a great number of rusty crayfish reduction.
Yeah, because I didn't know if they were even going to be, probably wasn't necessary to stock more of them. It was just more necessary to protect the ones that were already there. But
yeah, and then even on some lakes that exploded in rusty crayfish, even on some lakes, there were never smallmouth in them. So what the DNR did do to some lakes that are more private and, that had zero smallmouth in them, they made introductory stockings of smallmouth into those lakes. And now those populations are flourishing, those bass populations now.
Yeah, that's pretty, those kind of things always fascinate me. Yeah. But so I had to like double back and figure that one out. But, I know you lean kind of heavy into the smallmouth thing, and it's probably easy to get marked as like a bass guy or a smallmouth guy. But I also know you ventured away from that quite a bit. Like, I don't want to sell you short as, no, there's nothing wrong with being a specialist, but I'm saying I know you've done the multi-species thing.
I am, even though it's my specialty, I don't want to consider myself as like an elitist or like being a one-dimensional angler. Like, we've talked about this, like I appreciate every single species of fish. So I am non-discriminatory to any species in particular. If I had access to big channel cats or blue cats, that's what I would be fishing for. If I didn't have to travel far for anything, that's usually what my priorities and what my preference will be. But in recent years, I've gotten back into walleyes more. I love targeting big pike if there's an opportunity for it locally or if I have to travel. Yeah. And also, I love muskie fishing.
The muskie,
Yeah, and on days where I don't have to be responsible for other anglers, or if I'm free, if I have any free moment or a day off, chances are, I'd say 80% of the time, if I have to pick and choose between going bass fishing by myself or go muskie fishing, whether it's by myself or with a partner, we're going muskie fishing. There's a huge adrenaline rush, and I actually find muskie fishing to be far more stimulating and less stressful than bass fishing. I don't know why it's so less stressful, but I just appreciate casting at nothing almost. And when most hits that you get from a muskie, it's going to be either totally unexpected or it's just that there's a fish using the spot, but you just don't know when it's going to hit, really. So I think that's really the allure and draw for me.
Yeah, that's probably what puts the mind at ease when you go muskie fishing. You're already at peace with the fact you're going to have to work for it. Whereas maybe on a day of bass fishing, everything feels right and there's no reason they shouldn't be biting and it doesn't happen. So then you're then the stress of second guessing yourself and wondering what you're doing wrong starts to creep in.
Yeah. But when there's you're not going to catch a muskie every day of the week. That's a proven fact. But even on days where I don't catch a muskie, I am not discouraged. Whereas we've had days where the bass fishing totally sucked and we bombed out there. You return home to the cabin after a day on the water like that. You go through all your thoughts and you can't figure out why did those fish not bite. It's very discouraging. What
you go back to the old notebook over there? What the hell?
I go back to the notebook. I'll ask my friends hey, what did we do wrong? What do you think I did wrong? It's funny. I get more discouraged and pissed off about not catching bass when conditions are right or when they're poor versus muskies. I don't know. It's one of those things.
Yeah, the muskie thing, obviously, as we've spoken about it. That's one that I don't know, man. I'm long overdue for getting that one done. I still don't know if that's going to happen even this year, but I feel in the next couple, maybe the next 2 years, I've got to make that one happen. So I love looking at your posts every time. So what is muskie season? At what point do you kind of put down the bass rods and start focusing on that? Or do you really, or are they in conjunction with each other? Is it?
Well, where I'm at in Wisconsin, muskies are very strictly managed, but the whole state of Wisconsin is turning far more liberal than it should be. So they're thinking about making muskies open to catch and release only in the spring now, which I'm not in agreement with, because you want to protect the state fish. They are spawning still on very specific waters. You want to protect your state fish that makes all the money for you. But right now with the muskie season right now, it opens up for any type of catch and release fishing in general, last Saturday in May. And it stays open now up until the 31st of December. But once the lakes get all ice covered, ice fishing for muskies isn't allowed. But if you have any open water opportunities, whether it's on a river system or places that are ice free, you can still continue to fish for them.
Why when there's ice? Is there a mortality?
So I'm not too much into the politicking of it, nor know what the data or reasoning is behind it, but I'm pretty certain that it has to do with handling and trying to drag a 30-pound fish through an ice hole. It could be one of
with
those
the little bitty rods and stuff. I guess you're having a
you don't want to. So you want to protect that fish and not harm it in any way, but. To answer your question specifically, I'm geared for bass pretty much every day of the week. So if there's a specific time of year that I really want to get out for muskies, it's going to be from mid-June up until the first few days of July. That's going to be the post-spawn window. And then usually by the starting dates of July, all the lakes, that enters into the summer peak period. So all the weed growth is finally fully bloomed. The lakes are established well for summer. So I have found a very nice big fish window then late in June into early July. I really hate fishing for muskies in July and August just because the water temps, they can get hot. And then we have to deal with a lot of hot days. So your windows are just going to be at odd hours of the day, early or late in the day or overnight. I'd rather be not fishing at those times. And then I would say the month of end of August, you've got that end of summer to early fall transition when things start cooling down finally. It can be a very good time. And then the entire month of September and then into October. And then some years, if, the ice buildup is going to be late in the year, first ice, we have opportunities in November into mid-month.
Yeah.
So if I'm not bass fishing, that's when I'm in a muskie.
Yeah. That's one of those species that like I've gone muskie fishing, I think 5 times, 6 times in Missouri of all places. A lot of people like Missouri. Yeah, there was one spot. It was like at the time when I was living in Arkansas, it was like maybe a 3-hour drive, and it had muskie in this kind of small lake. And man, that's one of those fish. And maybe it's just because I'm inexperienced with them, but there's certain species out there like when you see them, it like I don't want to sound like I'm a scaredy cat, but it's like it's spooky. Like I'd see them, I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing's so cool.
Yeah, they exist. Yeah, it's one of those feelings.
I saw them every time that I went. I went 5 different times. It was at least 5 times, and I saw them every time I went. But I only had one solid like actual strike on a lure. Every other time I didn't know what I was doing. Complete idiot.
Yeah.
Like I'd have them follow, and then like I'd lose all composure, not know what I'm doing. Like I get caught up in just wanting to see the fish and like, not do what I'm supposed to do.
The muskies in particular, you have to really trigger them. You got to get their attention first and foremost. Get their attention, piss them off, and then you got to trigger them into striking. But if you don't do either of the 3, you'll get lucky and you'll just get hit at random, and that happens, and that's very common.
Yeah, I had a pretty funny encounter with one. Actually, it was the first one I ever saw. I was, it was like a kind of a windy day, and I'd got blown off into this sort of like submerged thicket of limbs. Like my boat was just wedged in there. So I'd started doing a little bit of rigging, putting a few lures on, and I just see something out of the corner of my eye, and I looked over. There's one swimming right past the boat. It was like a freaking... Yeah. I mean, it's probably
I've had that happen many times on a lot of lakes.
I'm like, oh my gosh! I like started trying to tie.
They don't muskies when they're cruising past you, they don't give a shit if you're over them or near them.
I mean, that thing was within 5 feet of the boat.
Yeah,
it just went.
Yeah, they're so disengaged. They just cruise on by, minding their own business. They don't care that you're there.
Yeah,
that's actually kind of funny when it does happen.
Yeah, such an awesome species of fish. Now, are you guiding for those two, or is that just kind of one of those things that's
I don't want to. Yeah. No, that's what really expert and professional anglers are for. And so I don't want to guide muskies.
Because I was going to say,
if I had any bass angler, like a repeat or like a good buddy of mine who's like, hey, instead of bass, let's go try for muskie. I'm like, okay. If I know they can fish well and they can handle it and they're open to it, then I have no problem doing that.
Muskie guiding seems like one of those things that's like
it's hard, man.
That'd be like the equivalent of like guiding somebody for a fly caught permit down here.
Yeah,
it's like the chance of failure is so great. Like
muskie guiding, like to be really good at it and to have results, you have to fish during windows. So even if the trip is being advertised as an 8 to 10 hour full day trip, like most serious muskie guides, they're gonna want you to commit to like an all day marathon. That some people operate that way, but other guys, they're only going to schedule trips and want to really target them during specific windows as it relates to the moon or time of day too. So it's tough work.
Have you cracked that coveted 50-inch mark yet?
Yeah, so I had it happen once. Well, I got 2 fish of that caliber. I've actually got 4 of them, but two of them fell like within an inch short, and then I've got one that surpassed the 50-inch range. So I guess I got like 4 of them that are like borderline on it. But back in 2010, I caught my first 50. It was a 51 and a half. Funny story about how that happened. It was kind of like a team effort with my partner in the boat. Like back then, like what's legal in Wisconsin is live bait fishing. So you can fish with multiple rods in your boat. You can deploy a live bait rod, have it dangle along the side of the boat and have that going while you're casting.
That's so like you bring the fish to you and then it sees the bait maybe?
You can. Yeah, you can.
That's cool. That's creative.
If it follows your artificial, it can, if it spots the bait that's deployed down there, It might hit. There's a good probability for it. But, back then, 2010, I wasn't really much into live bait fishing at that time like I am now, late in the season when we can do it. But, while casting at the time, we were fishing out of a 16-foot boat with me and my buddy. It's a small boat. We had one rod pegged in the back end of the boat. And, what I always determine with my partners and with me is like, all right, I'll give you the option. Since you're going to be fishing next to the rod, you can set the hook into that fish first, or if you want to just take turns setting the hook into whatever happens, we'll do that. So he ultimately decided with me, hey, I'm the chief. I'll take the whatever first hooks that comes our way. So what happened that day? It's a crappy rainy day, early October, late September, early October. I'm battling the flu then. I had no business being out on the water that day. I had zero energy. I remember sitting down on my front deck attempting to eat lunch. And then all of a sudden we see like the rod that's in the back of the boat. It starts bouncing around viciously. But what was so messed up about it was we're drifting in over 3 feet of sand and our sucker was mostly dead.
Yeah.
So like, what the hell? Okay, something must have taken our dead bait that was over the side of the boat. I grabbed the rod, boom, set the hook. Holy shit, it's a 51.5 incher. We got it, got a couple pictures, and off she went. That was my first encounter with it. We had no business catching that fish, and that fish really had no business being in that area and even taking down a dead sucker. Lifeless live bait that was dead. So I proved that theory that muskies, if it's a dead bait and if they're really hungry, they'll eat it.
It seems like sometimes it seems like sometimes the really, really, like, especially giant fish, like, don't follow the rules.
They don't follow the guidelines like we are taught. They don't. Yeah. And then, so that was my first encounter. The next encounter with the trophy giant, it happened in 2020. So just recently, 2.5 years ago, I had a day off from bass fishing, and the date was the 10-year anniversary of when I caught my 51. Same exact date. I think it was September 29th or September 30th.
Oh, that's my birthday.
10 years to the date. I had a day off, and that morning I got on Facebook and I started chatting with friends. I'm like, guys, I got like the same weather and conditions that I had exactly 10 years ago on this date when I caught my first mega fish.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm gonna go fish some memories today, which I never do.
Yeah.
And first, I made a mistake when I left the cabin that morning. I did not make sure to check and see whether my starter battery was all charged up on my boat.
You should have figured out a way to get the. You should have figured out a way to get the flu too.
Yeah. So as long as I had gas, I was okay. I didn't bother to check either of my 2 batteries, but I got to the lake. It was late morning. Luckily, my moon window, I had about an hour to spare, so I hit one spot. Didn't do shit. Then I decided, all right, I'm going to motor down across to the lake. This is the same lake where I pulled my 51 out of, by the way. But second spot, I'm working a top water across the shallow sandy flat with a bunch of weed and plant varietals. Out of nowhere, this beast just shoots out from shallow water. Never saw it coming. With like 10 feet from the boat. Like, I got my top water here, big fish. Came from right under it, smacked it. Quickest fight and battle that I've ever had. Easiest net job by far, but the fish being so massive and huge in size, like it was work to handle it and to make sure that she swam back. Because when you're by yourself and you're dealing with a 35 to 40 pound fish, like it's hard. It's hard on your body. You, instead of like a photo and video, you kind of have to start thinking and over prioritizing. All right, do I really need the to document this when I want that fish to swim back? But I kind of overdid it then. But the fish swam back down, no problem. We had our moment of glory. And then after I made that catch, that fish was about 35 to 40 pounds. I measured it, 49 inches and 75 inches, 0.75. So 49.75.
Well, you know what? At least you have the integrity to say it, to call it like it is.
Yeah. Like normally I round up to like the nearest 10th of an inch if possible, but like, all right, I'm going to call it as I see it, 49.75. And that's what it measured. And then after I made that catch, the fish swam off. I was laying in my boat like for an hour on the deck. I'm like, I have nothing to accomplish anymore. My day's over. This is great. I don't have to fish anymore this year. And then once the time came for me to move the boat and to get out of that spot, I tried to turn the starter. Nothing was clicking. Nothing was clicking. I'm like, oh shit. We drained the boat battery, the starter battery.
You had to earn that one. There was there's some sort of payment.
So I'm like at the other end of the lake. You know, there's almost like a mile difference between where I'm at to the boat landing. And I'm like, oh shit, what am I going to do to get back now? But luckily, my trolling motor battery, it was like a dual purpose starter, deep cycle. So I moved that over to my big motor, connected it. I was able to get back to the landing. So I avoided a calamity there. But that was a memorable story. I was by myself, so unfortunately I couldn't have anyone else be there with me to share it with, but it was pretty awesome. Just like you, when you're out there solo, you know, you recently caught that exotic sturgeon out of a river that was supposedly to be extinct, you know, same type of situation. We're by ourselves, man. So like the moment, like, you know, the feeling that you had in reading with you and your sturgeon, that's kind of what I had with that big ass muskie. You know, I'm like, you know,
you're just done.
You're hugging that fish while you're taking a photo with it, and then put it back in the water, watch her swim away and regain her energy. So it was one of those deals. So, and then I've had other experiences with 4-footers, you know, 48 to 49 inch caliber fish. That's about top end in a lot of northern Wisconsin lakes nowadays. But you know, any muskie that's 4 foot and up, that's a pure trophy.
Oh yeah.
They don't swim in every lake, and you're not going to catch them every year, unfortunately, unless you're really good and that's what your specialty is.
Yeah.
And I don't know everything about muskies. So like compared to my friends who exclusively muskie fish, their level of intellect is way up here. And then I'm like down below, like several levels below them.
I don't remember who it was. There was a guy that I was like following a while back that had like made this long post about like people slashing each other's tires in the darkness of the night, like all this crazy like infighting. I'm like, what the heck? Like those guys are just a different type of like.
There's drama within the community for sure.
A few of them like that though, but I don't know. When you chase a fish that's like a ghost, so many countless hours during the year that just eludes you. Maybe it drives you a little bit crazy. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
it can.
That's one that, man, I really want to check that. I had like got to a point where like I want to go catch one, but for me, it, like there for a little while anyway. I was like, I want to go, but like it has to be like Canada. I'm like, then I'm kind of getting to a point where I'm like, why am I making these like stipulations on myself? Like, why am I'm making it even harder now?
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. I'm going to check a few different fish off the list. I think this year, maybe next year, maybe next year will be my year. I'll have to give you a buzz, but same with the smallmouth thing. My brother Matt
stands. We've discussed it. The offer and invitation is there anytime.
I'd like to come up there for those big giant smallmouth. I envy like, oh my gosh, the smallmouth you get. My brother Matt, he travels a lot to like Canada and stuff. He loves big smallmouth. He'd probably be down for a trip like that. Like the two of us could get together for cool. Something like that. Because I don't know, he wouldn't want me to go catch giant smallmouth without him. That's like his thing.
That's his jam. That's cool.
He never wanted to go do the alligator gar thing, but like he'll go all over the country, all over the continent for different kinds of bass.
Yeah, I didn't know your brother Matt was a bass angler. Like I know Travis joins you for like all the exotic stuff.
Yeah,
like when he has an opportunity.
Travis will do the crazy stuff. Matt has gone to Mexico, California, out here to Florida, up to Canada. He's gone all over to catch all kinds of different bass, smallmouth, largemouth. Yeah, he loves that stuff. So we'll get together and do that stuff. He's, you know, he does other stuff as well, but you know, I don't know. You know, that's how we started fishing when we were kids. Like they would take me. I mean, that's pretty much everybody's the bass fishing, but but man, those smallmouth, geez. And I've caught smallmouth in like, you know, what's funny is I've caught them in like 4 different states. Granted, I was living in an area where all 4 states are like together. In Arkansas, it was like I lived in the corner of Arkansas where it's like
Arkansas, Oklahoma. You got Pickwick right there in Alabama, right? It's all border water.
I went to Missouri. or maybe it's only 3 states. Yeah, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri, I think is the only places that I've done it. But they were never those, not even remotely close to what you're catching. So,
well, back in the day, that was the mecca of smallmouth fishing, like where that's the territory where the former world records were caught at. You know, Pickwick, Dale Hollow. You know, that's the region.
Yeah,
but it's changing now. You know, the biggest smallmouth in the world now, they're residing in the Great Lakes. So like you have a shot at a mega fish in Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Erie in Ontario, and then, you know, the St. Lawrence.
Now there's like a whole other world opening up now with this whole live scope stuff. Are you running any of that on your boat?
Absolutely not. I've thought about it just to have the transducer as like an insurance policy, and also just to learn in real time and see how the fish are just behaving and interacting with our baits underwater. You know, if I can see it in real time. Yeah. But you know, fishing where I'm at, I have not needed live imaging or any of that to rely on. I don't want to rely on it. I still want to rely on my intellect and everything that I've learned along the way. I just want to do it the old-fashioned way, the way fishing was meant to be. But I do have the electronics that is compatible with it. You know, I run the highest on Lowrance units, the HDS 12 Lives in my boat. So, you know, if I wanted that transducer, which is only like $1,500, I can mount it to my boat. But do I really want to use it and rely on it? No. It's not the way I was brought up to fish, not the way I grew up. And, you know, I've never needed it.
Yeah, that one's kind of weird. I've obviously never used it. I do too much shallow water fishing, but but I know
when you're deep and offshore, that it's a valuable tool. It can be incredible. But what pisses me off though is, like, you know, I've learned a lot of my lakes over the course of several years. Back in the day, I only had a 14-foot aluminum boat with a 10-horse motor on it. Yeah. And my mode of technology was paper maps. So we're going back to like the mid to late 1990s. That's all I had growing up. And then obviously you make more money, you know, you're more successful in life. You can finally start affording all these high-end technologies, and, you know, just it doesn't coincide and align with my upbringing in fishing, really. But what really pisses me off, though, is I learned lakes the old-fashioned way, paper map, and just using my brain and memorization of areas and spots, and, you know, remembering fish that I catch over the years. Whereas, you know, I put in 20 years worth of time on a specific lake. Nowadays, newbies and newcomers, they're coming to my same water. They're learning a huge, you know, 3,000 to 4,000 acre lake within 2 hours, just because they have that live imaging and technology.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, like, you know, it pisses me off. You know, I put in the work, and then there's these guys, you know, destination anglers or people seeking a hot bite. They've got these technologies and they're able to figure it out within 2 hours, erasing the need to spend time anywhere, like, you know, you and I and everyone else doing it the old-fashioned way relied on. So stuff like that I don't like. And then there's days on the water where I know that, like, you know, we have no shot competing against guys who have the live imaging on their boats. You know, they're able to adjust on the fly, whereas me and my boat, the way we have it rigged and the way we operate, you know, we might not figure it out until a couple hours, whereas these guys, they're able to make an adjustment within a minute, and then they're back on the fish then. So stuff like that, like, you can't compete with, unfortunately.
It seems like every time you think that you've kind of, like, I don't know, like, fishing technology has, like, gotten to, I don't want to say as far as it can go. It's like, oh my gosh, what the hell is going to be next? Like, if you're literally, like, you can live look at the fish eating your lure, like, right in front of you. It's like, well, like, how much more can you do?
Yeah, like, one of my theories of what'll happen next, like, they're going to concoct some type of an X-ray imaging where you can just scan off your unit. Like, it creates like a scan of, like, the entire lake bottom. It'll be produced on your screen, and then you'll be able to see every single little
goggles on
weed bed. Yeah. You'll be able to zoom in on every piece of structure that X-ray scan completes, and then you'll be able to find and figure out where the fish are at. I think something like that might be next, but that's taking it to an extreme, man.
Yeah.
Like, they're erasing the fun of fishing the way it was meant to be, in my opinion. Unfortunately, I don't want to be an elitist, and, you know, I'm not totally against the concept of live imaging, but when you're over relying on it, And when it's shaping every single decision that you're making on the water, that's bad. Like, what are you going to do when you're without that technology? Say you're jumping into a buddy's boat who doesn't have that technology. Like, your fishing is going to suffer if you become too
no doubt
on a specific thing.
Because that's where it's going crazy down there is on that Texas lake. The OHIV bass are coming out and all these records are getting broken. You can like pick which fish you want to cast to. It's like, man, that's wild. But,
yeah. And that's how guys are catching their massive fish, giant largemouth and like world record size smallmouth. Everyone has that live imaging now.
Yeah,
fish
and I think
nowhere to hide, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah. It's not even out in the middle, like where they're like finding them out in the middle of the lake. It's so crazy. That's a totally different world for me. I've never I don't know, man. Like if you and I went fishing, I think I'd learn so much because I don't know the first thing about using electronics. I've always been a shallow water angler. Once I get into deep water, I have no idea what I'm doing. So I think, and I imagine that's probably a big part of what you do as a guide is probably, you're teaching them a little bit about the fishing itself, but surely a lot of the guys are wanting to learn how to I don't know, dial in or fine tune their electronics.
Yeah. So I run Lowrance's. So often if I have guys who are interested in a specific Lowrance product, I'm not sponsored by the way with them. I kind of wish I did just because of all the instructional stuff that I've been doing out of my boat and then with other people who read my stuff. But what I every day, I on my Ranger, we keep 3 screens, one at the bow. I got 2 on my main console that I use, 2 dual screens. And, every day, I'm showing people how to interpret what's on the side imaging or down imaging. So, I can differentiate between fish species that show up on the side imaging, with, all the different weeds, the different bottom composition, the various forms of structure. I can pick that all apart. I can show people exactly, this is what we're fishing and this is what it is. And another cool thing about these electronics is all the unique bait fish that it can find for you too. That's one of the coolest things. So on a lot of our lakes, we have a lot of pelagic bait fish species, various minnows, shiners. We've got smelt, Cisco. And one of the coolest things about side imaging is it can pick apart all that bait too, and it can find it too.
Yeah.
And that puts you in range with, in a likely range of where there could be feeding fish. If you can find the bait, be able to differentiate between it, and odds are going to be in your favor then.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, each day, even when I'm at the wheel driving the boat, I'm always idling around. My head is buried into these screens. Not only am I doing fishing from the back end of the boat and trying to put people on fish, but I'm also looking at these screens, an equal amount of time trying to find fish, trying to put us on the right spots that we have to be too. And, just having side imaging and down imaging, regular chirp sonar, and having good charts on your screens too. That's all invaluable. I rely on that stuff, but when it comes to that live imaging, you don't really need it.
Yeah. Well, even the electronics that you're using, that's a whole other skill set to learn. Because I've been in boats where people had it, and I'm looking at the screen, I'm I don't see.
Yeah,
I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, man. Anyway, I love watching what you're doing. I think it's awesome that you stayed in it, and I think it's awesome that you found a way to make money off of what you're passionate about.
I gotta say, it's not easy. It's actually hard.
Yeah.
If you have a primary career and then you have an opportunity to expand on that, explore different avenues, and try to pursue your passion, it can hopefully lead to something. And that's always been my goal. Not everyone's gonna turn into a fishing celebrity. I still treat myself. I'm a nobody. I'm a no-namer. But maybe when I'm 70 to 80 years old, people are gonna know who I am when my time comes, my expiration date comes. But it's you can't treat it as a way to become a celebrity. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah,
that's the thing. That's where YouTube and Instagram are. Pardon my language. That's where it's really fucking up a lot of people right now.
Big time.
That's making the whole industry very oversaturated.
I think if that is your goal, I don't know, man. That's an unhealthy place to be, mindset wise.
Yeah.
If things happen organically, great. That's cool. But if it gets to a point where people like, I don't know. And I think too, when people are like chasing that out of like desperation because they don't have anything else, it's like, I don't know, man, you're going to make some like reckless, excuse me, reckless life decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And you nailed it. Like you and I, like it's all organic, really. That's how you'll gain your following. Just doing what you're doing. Just have one platform to put it all out there, have a website or, start a little side gig and just like what I did. And then it just grows and cultivates organically.
Mine's always just kind of been a hobby for me. Like I said, I've got a job outside of this that pays well and I live very comfortably. So I'm totally happy. But it's always also like, obviously most of my fishing has been a different type of thing where it's like, I don't know. I wouldn't even call it unconventional, especially nowadays. It's like people have sort of embraced a lot of the fish that I chase, but it's also I don't know. You kind of feel like you have a cause when you're writing about certain fish that
you do.
At least in the past, had a lot more detractors. I don't know, man. It's like, I guess maybe if there's a silver lining to social media, like if people
find your fish to be so badass, like you can get all kinds of literary works entered into magazines and publishing platforms and even on television too.
Well, you see way more people doing it now, and I think that's because
are infatuated with them.
So that side of it's cool. So anyway, man, I don't know. I'm glad I got to get you on here. You and I have a bunch of history. I know we've been able to like meet other people through one another.
Yeah, we met a lot of mutual friends through
one of which was Pat, which was kind of like a special one to me.
Rest in peace, Pat.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you, I don't know, sort of introduced us. I mean, we met through your site, and I was very fortunate to get to have some awesome time with him on the water before he, passed. But that's one of those guys. It's like, man, that dude had we fished a few times together. He had like a big impact on me, and that was a relationship
he had a million stories too.
Oh my God, his stories are incredible. His stories were so great. That was a dude. I have not met many people on the same type of wavelength of just being like, I don't know, like we're like authentically happy with life than that dude. It took me back. I was like, this guy like actually loves fishing. Like this guy actually loves what we're doing right now. And so that was cool.
Despite all the shit that life threw his way, he just kept trucking on like it was nothing. That was crazy. The impressive part about it.
Yeah, that was just an impactful person to meet. And it's just cool that it happened because of like where you and I met. It's like, it's always interesting where these things sort of branch out. But yeah, man. So I know we've taken time to talk about these giant smallmouth bass that you catch. Some of the services even that you provide that aren't fishing wise. I know that we're getting to that point where maybe people might be more interested in building their own website, having their own sort of portfolio, but the services you provide on that end, the services you provide as a fishing guide, any of those sorts of things, like where can people find you? Websites, socials, things like that.
So I guess I'll direct people to my two main websites. So for fishing purposes, northwoodsbass.com, all one word, Northwoods Bass. That's where you'll find information on my guide service. And each month I produce a massive newsletter that's growing in popularity. And I also publish a lot of articles throughout the year. So you can find all that information, all the good stuff to read through at northwoodsbass.com. And then all my website stuff. So for the last 20 years or so, I've had my own website building company. It's my last name, Ragas, with the word media attached to it. So ragasmedia.com. You can find information on all the website related projects and all that technological stuff that I do for my real day job at ragasmedia.com. And then I also write for Midwest Outdoors Magazine. So each month I have an article published, and they do a pretty good job of utilizing all my content for their big platform.
Well, I can speak to your credibility on a lot of those things firsthand because your website building is awesome. You're like a very well-rounded guy with the media stuff, the guiding, the fishing, the writing, the instructional tutorials. You've clearly got a mind for detail. You've got that massive notebook of a lifetime of experience. If the house ever catches fire, you
I'm going to lose a lot of information.
Run back into the fire for that thing.
You know, I'm going to close it here because a lot of people tell me that I seem to reveal and give away far too many information. But if I'm not providing information and teaching people, then I'm not doing my job very well as a guide. So that's the one thing. If you're a fishing educator, you have to deliver that knowledge and information to people, whether it's for free or for, you know, getting paid for making a living off of it.
100%. I don't know, man. I feel like when people come to me, I can usually tell if people come to me like earnestly seeking knowledge, like they want to experience something new. You know, who better than you, or who better than me? Like, if not you, then who, to feel that person like, or send them on the right track? Because I don't know, they could just go watch a YouTube video and fish with gummy worms instead. Who knows? So,
right.
But Andrew, it was great having you on here, and I appreciate your
pleasure,
time.
David.
Yeah, man. We'll be in touch.
For sure.
Thank you for listening to the Boundless Pursuit podcast. If you enjoyed this show, your feedback, comments, and reviews are very important to me. Also, this podcast is just one element to a much bigger content outlet. I urge you to head over to www.haverodswilltravel.com, where you'll find audio, visual, and written editorial content. That is 3 dimensions of awesome fishing content brought to you by a very dynamic team of anglers. I hope that you'll tune in next week as we continue to build this program and have interesting and skilled anglers each Thursday. Thank you for listening.